Hi, everybody. We're going to see if this is going to work today. So, today I have another guest. Her name is Sherry. She's a friend of mine. I don't know if Brooklyn wants to come up, but I'll add her to the stage if she wants to, and anyone else. So, we're going to go ahead and add her. Sherry?
Yes, ma'am.
You here? Okay. Here we go. So, today is going to be the another part of the Johnny Gosch case, and we'll go over some stuff with y'all. But I don't know if y'all got to watch the other two because I was having so many technical difficulties. But on this, there's a lot of connections. And so we're going to go ahead and start it so that you guys can see. Unless I need you to come here a minute. So you guys can see, and I'll be stopping in between. No, yeah, put it up. There it goes. Right there.
The paper reports that two of the male prostitutes were given a late-night tour of the White House last year.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Bryant, and welcome to the Nick Bryant Podcast. Today, my guest is Peter Levenda. He is the author of more than 20 books, and he has tremendous expertise on the occult, the Nazis, and anything dark and sinister that you can think of. Peter is the man. Hey, how you doing, Peter?
After that introduction, not so sure. I'm doing great, Nick. How are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Peter.
Okay, no.
Well, I'm from that backdrop area behind you there. I was born in the Bronx, but lived in New York, for a substantial period of time. Got involved in the local scene, the literary scene in a sense, the local literary arts scene back in the 60s. I graduated high school in the Bronx in 68. Gives you too much information. And so I hung out with a lot of people that were involved in what later became the kind of occult revival period of New York City, which was late 60s through the 70s until about 1980, until about the Reagan election, about that period of time. So that's why I came to know a lot of very strange people, just even as a teenager. My high school, Columbus High School, is where David Berkowitz went to school, where Christine Jorgensen went to school. So, already the influences were there. Talked to a lot of people in different areas of life, not only in the sort of religious, weird, mystical areas, but also politically, Weatherman, the Panthers, and all of that, but also some of the international aspects as well. So the Northern Irish situation was very hot in those days, as was the Palestinian situation with the PLO and Yasser Arafat coming to the United Nations and all of this. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and I was the kind of person that would just sort of walk into these places and kind of sit there and ask questions and get the brochures and find out what was going on. So I got approached by the Moonies, by the Unification Church. I got approached by Scientologists. I got approached by everybody in those days. New York was the collection basket for all of this stuff. Everybody was there at some point, and we all knew each other at some point. We all forged these connections. Some were fleeting, some were more stable over decades. For the most part, I found myself talking to a lot of people like that, a lot of very unique individuals, some of them very committed to what they were doing. Some were already forming political alliances. Others were sort of abandoning all of that in favor of a more, what we would probably call a more hippie kind of lifestyle, a more loose approach to religion and mysticism and politics. So we knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody in those days. And I think alliances were sort of subconsciously being formed even then.
I was in New York in 1979. It was the first time I came here. I was a kid from rural suburban Minnesota, and I found it mind blowing. And I didn't stay that long the first time, but I ran in some pretty interesting circles myself. And I want to get into, we're going to look at the occult, various aspects of the occult, and we're going to have a discussion about it. And there's been a lot of accusations made about people in the occult practicing various. I'm going to start with that occult group of all occult groups, the Knights Templar. And could you tell us a little bit about the Knights Templar, Peter?
Yeah, well, there's the historical Knights Templar that's been pretty well recorded historically. They started, I think, in the year 1118. It was a group of 9 French knights. They decided they were going to go to the Holy Land to protect Christian pilgrims. At that time, the Holy Land was under the rule of the of Islamic forces. It was back and forth between Christian and Muslim forces gaining control of certain parts of the Holy Land, Jerusalem being the primary target. And so these these 9 French knights got the blessing of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, and they went out on this mission to protect pilgrims going to the Holy Land. Now we're talking 9 French guys, 9 knights taking vows
of Saint Bernard. We can't forget Saint Bernard.
Well, yeah. Well, Saint Bernard didn't go with them though. He stayed behind where it was safe. He blessed them. All of that, whatever value that was.
From Saint Bernard.
But Saint Bernard stayed home. But Saint Bernard was quite a mystic in his own right. I mean, he wasn't just a political engineer in this case. He wrote lengthy sermons on the Song of Solomon, which was one of the most mystical of the books of the Christian and the Jewish and Christian Bible. The Song of Solomon is really a love story. It's kind of erotic. And Bernard spent a lot of time writing about that, which will come into play later. But right now we have these 9 knights. They're going there, and they set up their bivouac at basically Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. And they were in the stables, I think, where the horses in the old days had been kept. And that's where they bivouac. That's where they set up their little base of operations. Well, something funny happens. We don't really quite understand it. But these 9 knights, they come back. They're called Knights of the Temple because they're based at Solomon's temple. So they are the Knights Templar. And they come back to France with a fortune. We don't know what this fortune consisted of. They came back with a lot of gold, a lot of money, a lot of perhaps intellectual fortune as well in terms of knowledge of things that they had learned while they were there. There were all sorts of stories. Did they find something at Solomon's temple? Did they find the Grail? Did they find the Ark of the Covenant? What did they find buried underneath Solomon's temple? So all these stories were spun about them. But one thing you can't avoid is that after they came back to France, how these 9 guys were protecting pilgrims is up to anybody's imagination, I guess. Even if they had assistance, it wasn't really a military base the way we would understand it today. So these 9 guys returned to France. In the space of 100 years, they built Gothic-style cathedrals all over France. I mean, the amount of monetary investment was enormous. And the amount of work to be accomplished in those days in that 100-year period was prodigious. They had to have a lot of workers. They had to have a lot of people who knew what they were doing, who understood geometry, who understood masonry, who understood how to build buildings this way. But these were not in the Romanesque style. These were real Gothic cathedrals, flying buttresses, and all of this weird stuff that they had learned somehow in the Middle East, they brought back with them, and they were going crazy building things. They became the people who originated the international banking system for the most part. These were people who were loaning money to kings and potentates all over Europe. So these guys, I don't know what they did, what happened to them, something happened to them. They came back and they were wealthy, they were smart, they were organized, and they were building a massive enterprise. So this was 1118 when it started. 200 years later, they were destroyed. They only lasted these 200 years. And they had loaned a lot of money to the King of France. They had loaned money here and there to various popes and various cardinals and archbishops and other noble people throughout Europe. And everybody finally decided, okay, enough is enough. We owe them too much money. The only way to get out of these debts is to get rid of them in particular. So they promoted a story that the Knights Templar were worshiping the devil. And the name of the devil was Baphomet. That's the name that they came up with somehow. And they were worshiping a head in a chapel somewhere, and the head was talking to them, or all kinds of stuff. They spit on the cross, they trampled the cross.
Sexuality.
Homosexuality was part of it, sure. But it was the Satan worshiping that got everybody hot and bothered, right? So on October 13th, Friday the 13th, they arrested the Templars throughout their area of control, throughout France, parts of other countries in Europe. They were all under arrest. The Templars were fleeing for their lives. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was arrested and thrown into prison and eventually executed, burned at the stake, for being a Satanist and for whatever trumped up charges they had. This is where the story then shifts into a different gear completely. Okay, the Templars are destroyed. Not exactly. The Templars were a multinational operation. So they had forces in Spain and Portugal. They had forces and connections all the way up into England, the British Isles, all the way up into Scotland. They were stretched all over the place, and not everybody was anti-Templar. So some of the countries gave permission for the Templars to move there, to relocate, to set up shop, sometimes under different names. In Portugal, it was a different name. I think it was the Order of St. John. And I visited some of those castles in Portugal. These were Templar castles. There's no question about it. These guys were Templars. And there's even the rumor that Columbus's 3 ships sailed, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria were Templar ships because of the red Templar crosses on their sails. So there was a lot of discussion that the Templars simply went underground, took a lot of their finances with them, and continued their operations where they could under different names, different assumed names. So we kind of have the prototype here of an organized crime operation from one perspective, or a kind of Fourth Reich, Odessa-file kind of operation from another point of view. Depending on how you want to look at it, it was the same group but different names, funneling money, moving assets across international boundaries, and setting up shop in different places.
And ultimately, a number of them migrated to Scotland.
Yeah.
They transformed themselves into the Masons. I think that's fairly well accepted today. I don't think that there's a lot of debate about it.
Well, this is what happened. You see, they were destroyed, quote unquote, in the early 1300s, like 1322, I think, or a little earlier than that, 1312, where they were destroyed. About 150 years later, from Scotland, we find the earliest Masonic documents. And these are documents that talk about having learned geometry, having learned the arts of Masonry from the Middle East, which is where the Templars had been located. This information was brought back, and it was secret, and there are certain rules that people must follow in order to gain this sacred information, to learn how to do all these things. And there was a mystical religious component to what should have been just simply putting one brick on top of another, right? So the idea that there was a mystical component, a sacred geometry, became something that was at the heart of Freemasonry since its earliest documents. Most historians talking about the Freemasons say, well, the first Grand Lodge was 1717 in London. That's true for the first Grand Lodge, but there were Masonic lodges going back at least 150 years earlier than that. So you can suddenly see the timeline is getting telescoped. It's getting closer and closer to when the Templars left Europe and went to Scotland in the 1300s. And 100 years later, suddenly there are these documents that exist talking about the rituals of initiation of Masons and the rules they must follow, and linking it to ancient Egypt, linking it to sacred geometry and all of that. It was already happening. So it's a pretty good chance that there was a Templar Masonic connection. And I think a lot of people tend to admit that that is so. They may not be able to prove it completely with a unbroken line of succession, but they can, it's certainly suggestive. You can make a very good circumstantial case for it.
Well, then there's the Rosslyn Chapel, which is about 10 miles from Edinburgh, that has a number of Templar symbols and ultimately Masonic symbols.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people that think that the Masons are up to something sinister. A lot of people think that anything that takes place in a secret society is sinister. And people tend to generalize, like Masons are into occult practices and doing very bad things, but there's thousands of Masons, thousands. Right. And some are very well practicing highly negative behavior, but I don't think that the majority are.
No, I mean, the Masons refer to themselves not as a secret society, but as a society with secrets, which is, I guess, one way of getting around it. But the rituals are published. They're there for anybody to see. I mean, you can pick up a copy, you can download from the internet the initiation rituals, especially the first three, the Blue Lodge degrees, the degree 1, 2, and 3, which are the core degrees of Freemasonry.
I know this is a little boring, everyone, but this is about the occults and the Freemasons. I think they were all kind of linked back in those days. So this is basically just telling that. I'm fixing to go into the video now of the connection between the serial killers. So we're going to add that to the screen. How do I do that? Stop. Huh. Hang on. I'm having to have help because it's 2 videos. Right there.
Welcome back to another episode of Strange Bar and Grill. I'm your host, JP. Today we have another wild, crazy, interesting story coming your way. This story is about the connection between John Wayne Gacy and Dean Corll and their criminal network of sick, twisted individuals. You just won't believe this story, guys. So make sure you stick around until the end. Again, the story is about John Wayne Gacy. If you're a true crime fan, you've heard of John Wayne Gacy, you've heard of Dean Corll. And if you're not a true crime fan, you've also heard of John Wayne Gacy because he is one of the most sick, twisted individuals to have ever walked this earth. But you've probably never heard this story. So make sure you guys stick around. But first things first, if you're new to my channel, make sure you guys leave a tip for that like button. Also, join that SBG family by hitting that subscribe button and hitting that bell notification. And as always, if you want something custom ordered, leave it in the comment section. All right, guys, let's go. And just a quick reminder before we start here, I will put the sources in the description below. Like I mentioned in the introduction, the name John Wayne Gacy is a pretty well-known name. So well known that it's crazy at how long it took for others to draw some very interesting and pretty explosive links that serial killers John Wayne Gacy and Dean Corll were somehow connected. Let's dig a little deeper into some of these connections and see what we find. Chapter 1: The Odyssey of John Norman. Our story begins in Dallas, Texas, during the year of 1973. Authorities were first put on the trail of a sex ring involving underage males after they caught up with a 24-year-old member of the group. The name of this organization was the Odyssey Foundation. Police caught up with its leader, John D. Norman. What they found were various pamphlets containing information on several young men, child pornography, and information on young boys and clients of the Odyssey Foundation. The confiscated evidence was enough to fill a pickup truck. How it would work is someone would pay a small fee to receive catalogs containing information on fellows, a code name for underage sex slaves that the clients could then purchase. This group would also cruise around looking for runaways at bus stops or straight up abductions. The group reportedly had customers in LA and Chicago. Now let's jump to the year 1977. 2 child pornographers are arrested in the state of Illinois. This leads authorities to a spider web of sex trafficking that stretches all over the continent. It eventually led to one of the leaders of this pedophile ring, known as the Delta Project, John D. Norman. There were also 50,000 to 100,000 index cards containing info on clients and victims. So who is this John D. Norman? John Norman was born October 13th, 1927. Mr. Norman is considered a violent sexual predator by the state of California. His psychiatrist, Dr. James Revis, had this to say about Norman. John is an unrepentant adult male sex offender who, in my opinion, will go to his grave without any remorse for what he had done. Norman's predatory behavior, according to the New York Times, stems back to the 1950s. First in 1954, then in 1956 in Dallas for sexual assault. He also has convictions in California in 1963 for such assaults, and in 1971 for sending obscene literature through the mail, a federal charge. He was also committed to a state hospital by the California Department of Mental Hygiene as a sex offender. According to the New York Times, in August of 1973, Texas authorities seized mountains of evidence after they raided Norman's apartment. As the heat turned up in Texas, Norman fled to Illinois, presumably under the name of Stephen Gerwell. At some point in Cook County Jail, he met his accomplice in Illinois, Philip Pask. We will get to Philip in a minute. In 1977, Norman was implicated in a massive CP ring bust by the police. Dentists, teachers, politicians, and other prominent members of the community were caught up in this investigation. The Chicago Tribune did a series on CP in 1977 and named Norman as the ringleader of a nationwide child pornography and prostitution ring. Norman served 4 years in jail on sodomy charges after a witness related to the case was murdered. After his release, he went to Pennsylvania. In 1984, Norman was arrested again and was charged with 3 counts each of involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, indecent assault, indecent exposure, and 3 misdemeanor charges of corruption of morals of minors, sexual abuse of children, and interference of custody. It was later revealed that in 1986 that he was running another CP mail order service under the name of Handy Andy. Norman skipped bail and went on the run. In August of 1987, Norman was caught in Illinois after being harbored by an unknown person, probably a member of Delta. After all of that, you would expect
Right here. Let me see. So what I'm trying to do is show you guys, what I'm trying to do right now is, and I'm still new at this, guys, so just bear with me, but there's going to be a bunch of links. Sherry, are you still up?
Yeah.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're trying to let you see some of the video, but we're going to go through and show you some of the links to what we have found in this case. I think you're all going to be amazed at what's going on in this. What, Sherry, you have anything to add, honey?
No.
No? Okay. Well,
Just waiting.
Okay. Well, let's just go ahead and get started again, and then we'll talk about it some more.
That they would put his sick ass away, right? Norman initially got 6 years, but ended up with a lucrative plea deal that only carried an 18-month sentence. Noticing a pattern here? He then moved to West Colorado, then spent the rest of his day in California during the years of 1995 to 1998. He was convicted of possessing CP in the state of California. Sometime in 2009, John David Norman died at Coalinga State Hospital at the age of 82. Philip Paskew was born June 11, 1953. He was a known accomplice of John D. Norman during his time in Illinois. Known for his violent streak, he was implicated in several thefts and murders, the most notable being 3 young boys murdered in 1977, one of which was set to testify against Norman. The link with Norman was made when it was discovered they shared a P.O. box that was used for distributing Norman's newsletters, which Paskey helped facilitate. On August 16, 1977, the Chicago Tribune outed him when they found out that he worked for the city of Chicago as a lifeguard. Paskey was described as being tall, blonde, having bad complexion, and often dressed as a woman. He apparently died in 1998. The Delta Project, the Norman Foundation, the Odyssey Foundation, Epic International, all names for Norman's vision of an international sex trafficking ring, providing clients with young boys through a network of pamphlets serving as a catalog of sorts, would be shared with prospective customers. His plan was to establish dormitories, which would be houses in which 3 to 4 young boys were kept in under the supervision of 1 or 2 adults. This is how it worked, according to a 1977 congressional hearing on child exploitation. The following is a conversation between a Senator Culver and a Mr. Lehman. Senator Culver asks, "Would you describe this project, how it works?" Mr. Lehman responded, "He sends out material and receives material from other agencies similar to his, which invites men to, well, one program is called the Dawn Program. In this program, he invites anyone who is willing to have a cadet, which is a young boy between the age of 13 and 19, right in there to have him live in his house. A Dawn should take 1 to 3 cadets to live with him in his house. He would pay a fee of $50 a month for having these cadets live in his house, but at the same time, these cadets would not only serve him sexually, but would also any other members of the Delta Project, which is quite vast, would contact these Dons, and he could invite them for a weekend, and these people would in turn pay him for letting them use his facilities, his house and the youth, and John Norman would get a percentage of this back." When Norman was busted in 1973, over 30,000 index cards containing names of victims and customers were found in Norman's possession. An additional 50,000 to 100,000 were confiscated in his 1977 arrest in Illinois. Norman had networks in California, Dallas, Illinois, possibly more of the U.S., and reportedly had connections to ones overseas. It is unknown how large and successful his operation became, but by all accounts, he had the names of several high-level members of society, including dentists, doctors, millionaires, politicians. He seemingly continued operations even after being busted in 1977, in which Norman and Paskey were somehow still able to print and distribute his newsletter from prison. So here we go. We're going to talk about this cover up here. So you're probably wondering what happened to the evidence seized in the multiple raids that took place on Norman's organization and members. The New York Times reported that during the 1973 raid in Texas, the detectives raided the second floor apartment of 3716 Cole Avenue and seized files, pornographic.
What do you guys think? It's showing all the different states. There's even more states included in this. So if you guys just watch it, you'll see. I'm trying to get through the video, but I have to stop it every so often so I don't get a copyright. So, but we'll go ahead and start again. And when we get to the end of this, we're going to discuss this. Hang on.
Literature, a camera, photo engraving equipment, stationery, an electric typewriter, and hundreds of booklets with names and addresses. The confiscated material filled a pickup truck. Well, they were tossed out by the State Department of Texas. Basically a nothing to see here, folks type of thing. As for the 50,000 to the 100,000 index cards containing those names confiscated in Illinois, recently a request was made to see those index cards, only for police to state that there are no records that match your request. It was reported that amongst those names were that of prominent politicians in Washington. So you do the math on that one. To speculate a little, this might account for the reason that information of both Norman and Paskey is incredibly hard to come by. All I can find are some newspaper articles from the 1970s, mugshots of Paskey, a few grainy black and white photos of Norman, and some of him as an old man. Other than that, any research compiled on this case is limited to a few forum posts, a few YouTube videos, and one local news report. This alone is pretty compelling, though sadly it's not surprising that this was swept under the rug, especially in the 1970s when it was a lot easier to do that kind of thing. But in the words of the late Billy Mays, but wait, there's more. Chapter 2, The Killer Clown Connection. Anyone with a passing familiarity in the topic of serial killers knows the name John Wayne Gacy. In 1978, authorities arrested, charged, and convicted John Wayne Gacy on 33 accounts of murder. All of his victims were young boys that are believed to have been murdered between the years of 1972 to 1978. Authorities excavated his now infamous crawlspace, which contained 26 of his victims. The rest are believed to have been dumped in the Des Plaines River. John Wayne Gacy was reported to be a very prominent member of his community, often throwing huge parties and even dressing up as the now infamous Pogo the Clown for children's birthday parties. He was also tightly affiliated with the Democratic Party and a prominent club called the JCs, which I will go into later. So what is Gacy's connection with this CP ring? So basically we have a confession. During Gacy's initial confession, he was being questioned about Robert Peast, someone who he couldn't account for. He also asked investigators if they caught anyone else. He also claimed that his house was being used by multiple people, which would corroborate with the Delta Project's dorms. Allegedly, one of the victims in Gacy's house was killed while he was out of town. But we also must remember, this is coming from a man who was currently having his crawl space excavated for corpses. So what he says is dubious at best. We also have a taped prison confession. A video on YouTube surfaced of a man who collected various things related to John Wayne Gacy. One of these items is a taped conversation that Gacy had in which he vents his frustrations of being the only one to take the fall for the crimes he was convicted of. Furthermore, he named 4 people also involved: Cram, Rossi, Norman, and Paskey. We also have the paperwork. This is the glue that holds this part of the theory together. Several pieces of paperwork showed that Philip Paskey was employed and took payment on 3 separate occasions from John Wayne Gacy's construction company. It would be too big of a coincidence for them to not have any knowledge of each other's interests. Then we also have the JCs. By all accounts, John Wayne Gacy was a very prominent member in this chapter of the JCs. He was even considered the most valuable new member. He would often throw stag parties to lure new members in, which proved successful. Even after his arrest and conviction of child molestation, he still remained a very prominent member. Who are the JCs? The JCs, according to Wikipedia, is a leadership training and civic organization for people between the ages of 18 and 40. It is a branch of Junior Chamber International. Areas of emphasis are business development, management skills, individual training, community service, and international connections. Okay, so what is so special about that? Well, the JCs have had their very prominent members pass through their ranks. People like Bill Clinton, Elvis Presley, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Bill Gates, Howard Hughes, and many more prominent names in politics, entertainment, and industry. While all we can do is speculate from here, we must remember that Gacy had political ties. Which brings me to my next point, Occam's razor. So using this principle, we can logically infer that a man with Gacy's predilections would seek out those with similar interests and resources. Seeing how Norman was in Illinois at the time, this would make even more sense. Take it a step further. Gacy had connections in high places. Assuming the names of elite folks were on those cards, it wouldn't be too much of a leap to think that Gacy would at some point become privy to the Delta Project's existence. So now that we got that piece out of the way, I wanted to discuss some of the possible accomplices. Many in the true crime community have speculated on whether or not Gacy had help with his killings. We know that he did have help digging up his crawl space. However, as far as murders go, the mainstream theory is that he acted alone. Even one of his victims, Jeffrey Rignall, asserted that there was someone else in the house while Gacy raped and was attempting to murder him. Though this theory, if true, would pretty much disprove the idea of the lone wolf, here are a few names that seem to be connected with Gacy. Philip Paskey. It is very likely Paskey helped facilitate Gacy's killings. To what extent is unknown, but the paperwork give a lot of credibility to this idea. Philip was also in his 20s at the time, so he could have easily lured in victims or used brute force to abduct them. Or he could have just been a willing participant, since it seems he doesn't mind killing at all. Michael J. Rossi, an employee of Gacy's construction company, and even lived in Gacy's home for a while. He also helped dig the trench in Gacy's basement. A strong candidate, Michael Rossi is also linked to mob activity in the early 2000s. He was arrested for shaking down and beating up union projectionists. David Cram, another Gacy employee and survivor of one of his attacks, ended up committing suicide in 2001 by hanging himself in the Cook County forest. Who knows with him, he may have literally just been a victim, so I don't want to point the finger too hard. However, it is said that he was the person who connected Gacy with Paskey. Robin Gosch and the Chicago Rippers. Let us jump to the early 80s. 18 women turn up dead and mutilated in a ritualistic fashion in Chicago. One woman manages to escape a van after a group of people try to kill her. This van is found, and the owner, Robin Gosch, is now the prime suspect. However, the evidence is thin, though police manage to catch up with his other 3 associates, who then spill the beans on everything. They go on to confess that they are a satanic cult that abducts women, performs breast mutilations, and even partook in cannibalism. Robin Gosch never confessed and still maintains his innocence to this day. Luckily, he's serving a lengthy sentence. He was up for parole in the year of 2022, but thankfully he was not paroled. One of his accomplices was up for parole in the year 2023. But what you're maybe asking, now what the hell does this have to do with Gacy? Well, Robin Gosch was reportedly a former employee of Gacy's at his construction company. Here's what bothers me about this. First off, how underreported the Chicago Rippers are. You would think that early 1980s America, in prime satanic panic mode, would jump all over a real and verifiable case of a satanic cult who were offing women in a ritualistic fashion. Being into true crime for as long as I have, the Chicago Rippers completely flew under my radar. I only learned about them recently while researching John Wayne Gacy. Secondly, there's not a lot of scrutiny on this relationship, like at all. Most of my friends who are interested in serial killers aren't even aware of this connection, and it's never been brought up in any mainstream documentaries, especially with our cultural fascination with death cults and serial killers. This strikes me as very odd. Now, as compelling as this sounds, there are a few problems I've run into with this connection. First off, I can't find any actual evidence of Gosch working for Gacy. It seems to have come from the police. Gosch himself even denies knowing Gacy, though Gosch never confessed, so we can't know for sure. Chapter 3, The Candyman of Texas. In the early 90s,
Okay, Sherry, you on? So we're going to talk about this a little bit because there is a link. I think Jasmine done a show on it, and it showed the link between Adam Walsh and Jeffrey Dahmer. So Lisa was asking about that. I haven't found a link to Jeffrey Dahmer. However, I have found the link between the Rippers, the Chicago Rippers, John Wayne Gacy, the Corals, Dean Coral, also the Finders group, which was the Masons. It was an occult, the Delta Project, if you went back and watched some of the other videos. But I'm going to explain a few things. Sherry, are you on? Are you on, Sherry?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I wonder how come you can't hear me.
I don't know. That was weird. But anyway, let's go ahead. So some of the research that you did, what did you find, Sherry?
Nothing that wasn't already talked about, more or less.
So everything that we've covered?
Yeah, so far.
Okay.
Except
Huh?
I do have a question. There was one guy who had said that he had gotten a ride with Gacy, and
Yes.
Gacy had put him up in the hotel room and
Yes.
tried to come in that door, and they actually got away.
Yes. Yes, there was one that got away from him. I think his name was Jeffrey. I can't remember the name, but he actually testified to some
Okay,
of the. Yeah, he was the one that said that John Wayne Gacy did have help.
okay. Yeah, because he saw him. He should
Yes.
have been able to identify him.
Exactly. But nobody listened. That was the problem that everyone was having. So I'm going to go back just to clear everybody up on what has already been covered. Paul Benassi was the one who admitted he was also part of the child pornography. They used him as a victim for years. And he ended up being the one that they made help abduct Johnny Gosch. So his brother, Timothy McCoy, his mother married a man named Jack McCoy, and they had a child named Timothy McCoy. Timothy McCoy was John Wayne Gacy's first victim. So Paul Benassi and John Wayne Gacy had that connection. Philip Paskey lived with John Wayne Gacy. He was also employed with the PDM contractors, as well as Michael Rossi and David Cram. Michael Rossi actually moved in with Gacy and worked for PDM. He worked from May 23rd of 76 to 1977. He assisted Gacy in the clowning at the grand openings of the business. So he went by, John Wayne Gacy went by Pogo the Clown. Y'all heard that in the video. Rossi went by the name Patches. John Norman was part of the Franklin scandal, as well as Lawrence King. I think I said something about Lawrence King in the last video. He was a powerful leader who saw that the Franklin Credit Union was going under. So he got all the pedophiles to put their money in this credit union, and it became a big, that's why they call it the scandal, the Franklin scandal. But they were also connected to the Delta Project. And they were connected to a little thing called Boys Town. That was in the last video. It was children who were either runaways or, in this place for various reasons. Sometimes families, just couldn't afford to take care of their kids or whatever. So that was crazy there. Philip Paskey, y'all heard them talking about him. He had so many links because he worked with John Wayne Gacy, but he was also linked to John Norman, who was the big time scandalous over all of this. So we just trying to get that. And then David Berta, he was arrested for child pornography. He was also in this link. So we're going to go back to the video and let y'all finish watching this. But we just wanted y'all to know a little bit about what we found in the research of this. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute this.
1970s in Texas, a string of murders bore a resemblance to the horrors that Illinois would soon face in 1978. Dean Corll was murdered by his accomplice while in the middle of raping another young boy. Elmer Wayne Henley was a 17-year-old accomplice of Corll, who would lure his high school and neighborhood friends to Corll in exchange for money and drugs. Police later recovered 17 bodies of young boys buried under a boat shed. Then 11 more spread out across various bodies of water. Since Corll was killed before he could have been arrested, along with Gacy trumping his terms of body count, the Corll case faded into relative obscurity until the internet. Corll and Gacy shared a lot in common when it came to victim selection. It is even said that Gacy took inspiration from Corll, in particular the handcuff trick. Now, two very similar serial killers operating on opposite ends of the U.S. This alone isn't much to go on. Now, I will admit that the connections made here are purely tentative. However, there is enough interesting stuff here to warrant some speculation, even if physical evidence is lacking. So let's discuss his connections to Norman. But first, we'll look at location. Norman was fully operational in Texas during Corll's career of boy murder. In fact, Norman left Texas mere months after the Corll case became news. The police busting Norman at the time did not think there was a connection between him and Corll, but later considered it a strong possibility. Let us also consider that Corll was killed August 8th of 1973. A week later, on August 15th, is when Norman gets raided by police and they discover his massive pornography and prostitution ring. Let's look at the 1975 CP arrests. In Houston, Texas, during the year of 1975, authorities seized thousands of images of CP. 11 of them were identified as Corll's victims, which tells us that he at least had access to a distribution network. This led to the arrest of 5 people in Santa Clara, California. So let's look at the statements that Corll made. Over the years that Corll was killing, he had a total of 2 known accomplices. Accomplices he would pay lots of money in order to procure victims. When his first accomplice started to become privy to what exactly Corll was up to, it was reported that Corll told him that he was a part of a pedo CP ring, before later admitting that he just kills the boys. While the pedo ring thing could have been an excuse to not have to admit to murder, it's interesting nonetheless. Corll also moved a lot. So Corll moved to different houses a lot in his killing career. This could indicate some kind of income source, possibly from producing CP or procuring and selling boys. And again, we'll look at Occam's razor. Applying this again, just think 2 sick pedos in one city, birds of a feather flock together. It makes sense. With the death of Corll, before any arrests were made, this is only up to speculation at this point. However, there are definitely notes of interest to consider. Chapter 4, Notes of Interest and some conclusions. I've tried my best while presenting this case to stick to the things that have some veracity, though it is hard considering that the information in this particular case is very sparse, especially info concerning our key players, Norman and Paskey. All I'm going off are some old newspaper articles and info that I can scrape up online. However, there are some interesting and logical dots that can be connected with some of the players in this case. Philip Pask and the Franklin cover-up comes to mind. In the late 1980s, Republican Senator of Nebraska and the most decorated Vietnam vet of all time, John DeCamp, uncovered a massive pedophile ring. This came about when he began investigating the Franklin Credit Union for embezzling funds ran by Republican hopeful Larry King. Soon, victims of the ring would come out to testify against King and various elite figures in American politics and entertainment. What ensued was multiple assassinations of key witnesses, a reluctance to investigate by the FBI and other investigatory departments, witness intimidation, and a complete folly of justice. One of the key witnesses, Paul Bonacci, had a testimony that fit the known description of Paskey. Paskey was tall, skinny, had pockmarks on his face, and often dressed as a woman. This is exactly how Bonacci described a man named Tony, who was instrumental in kidnapping Johnny Gosch, America's first milk carton kid. And that's another interesting story. Maybe if you guys want to hear about that story, let me know in the comment section, and we can check it out. Bonacci and Noreen Gosch are to be believed. Johnny was one of the victims kidnapped into King's pedo ring. And we also have to look at the John Norman and Jack Ruby connection. According to a user on the website called Deep Politics Forum, he unearthed records that Jack Ruby, yes, that Jack Ruby, rented an apartment from a man named John D. Norman in the early 60s. Norman would have been in his 30s at the time and was known to be in that area. Furthermore, we could extrapolate that Norman may have had the same mafia and intelligence connection that Ruby had, seeing how the mob was likely the one helping to distribute some of the CP. And we know that Michael Rossi had mafia and possibly big politics connections as well. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today. If you guys liked what you watched and heard, make sure to leave a tip for that like button and join this SBG family. I'm going to be bringing you wild stories, interesting stories to you guys weekly. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and hit that bell notification so you're notified when these stories are out. All right, guys, be safe, be good.
So what do y'all think? You heard it even connected Jack Ruby, which was the guy who killed, what was it? God, I can't think. Sherry, who was it?
I don't know. I don't even.
No, it wasn't John F. Kennedy, was it? The name,
No.
I'll see who he killed. Hang on, let me research that. You can go ahead and ask some questions if you want to while I check. Jack Ruby. Wasn't it Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yes.
The one that killed, yes, that's right. He was the one, Oswald was the one that killed John F. Kennedy, correct? So you see this connection, it continues to go. I'm only just trying to find the connections to Johnny Gosch. So tell me what you think, Sherry.
So this Jack Ruby ties into Johnny Gosch, is what you're saying?
I'm saying that Jack Ruby was part of this pedophile ring. That's what they were just telling you, that there was connections to him.
Yeah, I haven't read much on him yet.
Yes. And I believe it was because things were coming out, which could have been why he got killed. You know, people say, oh, well, he was killed because of the affair with Marilyn Monroe. But what if it was this big pedophile ring? What do y'all think? Sherry? I mean, what if the president had uncovered some of this stuff, you know, and was coming out with it about these rings? We really don't know.
Okay,
Sure.
I see where you're going.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't want to spoil it and tell you guys how it ended, But the CIA was involved as well. That's why I believe there was more to John F. Kennedy's death than what everybody knew. I believe it was he was uncovering this pedophile ring, because if you remember I think it was the second video, they were actually some of the people in the White House. I'm not going to say who they are. Y'all can go and research that, but they were actually in on this. No, he did. Yeah, Oswald, he did. That's what I think. Oswald didn't kill him. I think this was, I think that the president was uncovering some of this stuff. And I think Oswald took the fall for it myself. That's what I think. I believe this pedophile ring was going around the world, because if you've seen that, there was some overseas as well. And I believe they got wind of it and they had to shut him up. What do you think?
So you don't think Kennedy was involved in any way?
No, I don't, because there's
You
no
think-
link. I couldn't find a link to him.
Okay.
So, yeah, I couldn't find a link. The only thing I can think is he was killed because he had uncovered some of this. Maybe he saw something going on at the White House. I don't know.
He wanted to shut him down.
Yes, just like Lee Harvey Oswald. I believe he was, forced into telling, you know what I'm saying? He was forced into telling that he was the one that done it. For whatever reason, somebody had something on him or something. I don't know. So, what do y'all think? What's your opinions on it? Sherry? I lost Sherry. Thank you, Debbie. There's so much more. There's more than what we have uncovered here, that not even with Johnny Gosch. There is links to Jeffrey Dahmer and Adam Walsh. You back, Sherry? Sherry.
Yeah, I was reading something.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I lost you. Kenny?
No,
yes.
I was reading this. He killed. Huh. Okay, so that's who killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yes, Jack Ruby. And the reason they killed Lee Harvey Oswald, in my opinion, was to shut him up, because he didn't do it. I believe that the president was killed. Kennedy was killed by either the CIA that was involved in this, or because, I mean, you got to look. If you read up on Lawrence King, he had a record a mile long, but he was so influential. And I believe somebody hired a hit on Kennedy, and they.
Well, if you look at a lot of these people, they've gotten away with a lot of stuff for a long time.
Yes. And with Jack Ruby being part of the pedophile ring, it makes a lot of sense why he killed Oswald, to shut him up, because they made Oswald take the fall for Kennedy's death, which all links back to the Johnny Gosch case. So y'all see what I was going through, why I wanted to put up so many videos, because I wanted y'all to see that it wasn't just Paul Benassi saying, hey, I helped kidnap Johnny Gosch. He helped because he was also a victim of this. And probably the only way that he was going to survive without telling anybody was to come out and help. I mean, what do y'all think? What do you think about it, Sherry?
I gotta do research on that aspect of it, because I don't know.
But the fact that you just heard him say that John Ruby was linked. There was I can't even go into detail how many cards was found with victims on it, but it was up in the thousands. And
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, because for something like this to run efficiently like it did,
yes,
and back in those days, it took a lot of people in power.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And I believe there was some that wanted to stop it, and that's why they're not here. You said, I need to be a detective. No, you can get killed for this kind of stuff, But if you just go and do your research, guys, if you find a link to something and just keep going through, I mean, it's something that all of us can do. You'd be surprised, what you can tie together. So if you can find his last speech, that's why he was killed. He wanted to, yep. And the CIA was involved in this. There was people that came out. Paul Benassi was one of them that said basically the CIA was involved. And I believe that's why our president got killed, because he knew what was going on and he was going to stop it. So do you agree, Sherry, that that's a big possibility?
I mean, it's very interesting. I'll give you that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. I mean, we still have it going on now, so
Yeah. And it could
it's
be
not, I mean, were the Clintons linked?
to Johnny Gosch.
No, were the Clintons linked with any of those prominent scandal people
Well,
in the White House at that time?
I don't know. I know Ronald Reagan was. Ronald Reagan was the president at that time. Whether he was involved, I can't say.
Yeah.
However, there was two male prostitutes brought to the White House. That's in the second video. And these came from the guys who were actual victims of what happened. So that tells you that somebody, they didn't say it was for the president. They didn't say who it was for. They just said that they were brought to the White House as male prostitutes. So, and these came, Paul Benassi. Paul Benassi is now married. He went through a lot of therapy and stuff, and he has a wife and kids. But he came out to try to help Noreen Gosch, because she was at wit's end. People were telling her she was crazy because she was uncovering all these links, and come to find out it was true, So, I mean, you're linking John Wayne Gacy, the Candyman. You're linking, all these cults. I mean, that tells you this is worldwide. A lot of people are involved.
Yeah, that's not easy to do back in the day either, because of the technology they didn't have.
I know. It makes you, so you can imagine all these children coming up missing, that there might be a link to another nationwide pedophile ring. It happened back then, and they got away with it for so long. I feel like a lot of cases they were wrong. I do too, y'all. I do feel like some of the cases, a lot of people went down. Because if you recall on Adam Walsh, it was Otis Toole who took the rap, but Jeffrey Dahmer was seen at the mall the day he went missing, and where his head was, where they found Adam's head. So that alone tells me that Jeffrey Dahmer, either if he didn't participate in it, he had knowledge of it, because it doesn't make sense how he was at the mall and at the crime scene. Well, maybe not the crime scene, but where they found the head. So I don't know where the crime took place. But I just wanted you guys to see the links between it, and you can continue to keep going. You're probably going to find a lot more. So I just wanted the connections with Johnny. I know there's more connections, and I know that there's a lot of people involved in this. And I think that the children that are missing today, that's what's happening. I think there's more pedophile rings that are connected state to state that we don't know about. And that makes a lot of sense with Jeffrey Epstein and what was happening in that. What do you think, Sherry?
Yeah, for sure.
It's just sad. Our children aren't safe anymore, Does anybody have anything you want to say? Or Sherry, anything you want to say? anything. Also, I wanted to ask you guys if you wanted to go on the page and send me some cases that you want me to cover. I want to do. There's several that I want to cover. Sherry and I now are covering Tabitha Tutors. So that's a little girl that's missing here. She has ties to my sister-in-law, and so I'd like to cover that case. But I also want to cover some of the new cases. But if there's something that you guys would like me to cover, just reach out to me and let me know. I'm going to go ahead and put my email up here. It's relentlessforanswers@gmail.com. But that way you guys can reach me. And I want to thank Sherry for helping me today. I'm still new at this, y'all, and I get nervous because I'm afraid it's going to mess up again. So,
Now you're doing great.
but thank you. I sure was nervous coming on. I was like, please, please. I even had Sherry praying so that our line wouldn't go down again. So, and thank God for my granddaughter because it's a whole different computer than the other computer I was working on. So everything is different. So she had to help me. So we'll thank Elizabeth as well. But I've been watching Manson. I actually agree with you, Lisa. I think there was a lot more to that story too. Charles Manson. I want to do some old ones, but I also want to do new ones. So anything you guys can think of, please let us know. I'm going to have Sherry on board helping me a lot more now. Ain't that right, Sherry?
I guess so.
She's my how do you say it? Fabulous sister?
Fabulous.
Yeah.
I just don't know this particular case you're working right now. So I'm a little lost.
I had been working on this for like a month, so she's kind of new to this case, but it was pretty good because I kind of threw her in here and she did well with it. So that's what we need, somebody that's going to do well. Now I got to teach her the computer part so she can help on that too. Ain't that right, Sherry?
Well, what's your billing address here?
You going to send me a bill?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys are awesome. I don't know what I would do without you. And y'all look forward to the trivia night. We're going to do a trivia night. Also in group, I posted a video of I want to do movie night. And that movie I wanted to cover was called Run, what was it? Run, Hide, Fight? Run, Hide, Fight. And it was about a school shooting. So you guys will watch the trailer on it. Let me know if you're interested in seeing that, because I'd like to do a movie night. What is it? Oh, that it's an interesting. I don't think it's real, but I don't know what it is. But it's an interesting show. I haven't seen it, but I watched the trailer on it. So if you guys want to jump in and give me some ideas on some shows for movie night and the trivia, we've already got that set up. I've got Sherry helping me on that now, don't I? Yes, movie night StreamYard. And then I'm going to stream movies. And we're also going to do, I think I put it for Saturday, didn't I, Sherry? For the trivia?
Saturday.
Yeah, these are going to be about serial killers. So you got to guess, basically guess who they are or guess their nicknames, different things. So I hope you guys jump in and enjoy it. I just want to make it fun, not just about covering cases, but make it fun where people want to come in and join us. So Sherry's going to be helping me on that as well, right, Sherry?
Sherry's mouth's open really wide right now.
Don't you just love how I volunteer you? In the daytime is good for me. Okay, that's fine. I could do some in the daytime and one at night for the ones that want to. So that's fine. I'll make sure I write that down, you knew. All right. Anybody got anything you want to say, Sherry?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay.
You
Well,
might want to do like a poll for people for that trivia night and stuff because different people, different time zones and stuff.
yeah, that's what she was just saying because her husband's at home at night. So we could
Yeah.
do trivia in the daytime and we could do one at night. And that way
Okay.
we get everybody involved that wants to be involved because I understand that everybody wants to play in it. It's going to be interesting. So, and if you guys have questions that you want to throw in on the trivia, that'll help me as well because especially running two, one in the morning and one at night, that would work. So, well, Sherry, thank you so much for coming on panel and helping me, and everyone for being in chat and in the video with us. It means a lot. Is there anything you want to say, Sherry?
Nope. Thank you, Karen. You're doing a good job, Kay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and put the outro on and see y'all in the next video.